I woke up to the smell of vanilla-scented air freshener, the kind my mother sprayed obsessively to mask the staleness of our house. My head throbbed, my vision blurred, and for one dizzying second, I thought I was hungover. But then I saw it. The familiar cream-coloured walls of my old bedroom, the two perfect floral curtains I'd always hated, the silver-framed photo of Camilla on my dresser. Her face, not mine, because of course. My hands flew to my face, smooth skin, no wrinkles. I stumbled to the mirror and nearly choked. 17 again. 17. The year before everything went to hell in slow motion. The year I still believed if I just worked harder, smiled brighter, they'd finally see me. A knock at the door. "Elara, breakfast in 10. My mother's voice clipped and polished, like she was reminding the maid to dust the china. No good morning, no happy birthday, not that I expected it. Today was Camilla's day, after all. The piano recital, the event that would once again eclipse my entire existence. I dressed mechanically, my mind racing. This wasn't a dream. The memories of my first life, no, my only life, were too sharp, too vicious. The years of swallowing their neglect like spoiled fruit. The way they had flinched when I hugged them, like I was leaving stains on their designer clothes. The night I found the adoption papers in my father's safe, the truth screaming up at me in black and white. They stole me. Downstairs, the scene was a parody of domestic bliss. Camilla sat at the table like a princess holding court, her golden curls perfectly arranged, her laugh like wind chimes. My father chuckled at something she said, his newspaper forgotten. My mother hovered, refilling Camilla's orange juice like it was sacred nectar. I stood in the doorway, invisible as always. "Elara!" My mother finally glanced at me, her smile tightening. "Don't dawdle. Camilla has rehearsal at 9. I didn't move. "It's my science fair today. At 2. A pause. My father didn't look up from his coffee. "We'll try to make it?" "Try." The word slithered between my ribs. In my first life, I'd nodded, desperate to believe them. This time, I just smiled. "Sure?" Camilla sighed dramatically. "Ugh, I wish I could go, but Madame Duval would murder me if I'm late." She flashed our parents a grin. "You're coming to the recital, right?" "Wouldn't miss it," my father said, warm as sunlight. I buttered my toast, the knife scraping loud enough to make Camilla wince. The irony was almost funny. All those years I'd thought I was the problem. Too quiet, too awkward, too much, when the truth was so simple. They never wanted me at all. The clock ticked. The lies hung in the air like smoke. And with every second, the fire in my chest burned colder, clearer. This time, I wouldn't beg. This time, I'd walk away. The recital hall glittered like a jewellery box, all gilded mouldings and velvet seats filled with people who'd paid more for their handbags than Mira's entire farm was worth. I sat in the back, fingers digging into my thighs, watching my parents beam from the front row, like Camilla had single-handedly reinvented music. When she floated on stage in that ridiculous tulle dress, the applause nearly lifted the roof. Her fingers touched the keys, and suddenly everyone was holding their breath, even me, though not for the reason they were. Because right then, as the first note rang out, I noticed it. The programme tucked under my mother's chair. Camilla Laurent, 16th Annual Young Virtuosos Gala. In honour of her 17th birthday. The date screamed up at me. June 12th, my birthday too. Not that you'd know it. No cake waiting at home, no awkward family dinner where they'd remember halfway through to hand me a gift card. Just this, another shrine to Camilla with me as the unpaid extra in my own life. The music swelled and something in me snapped. Not dramatically, not with fireworks. Just a quiet, final click, like a lock turning. I stood during the standing ovation, not to clap, but to leave. No one noticed. My father was too busy filming Camilla's curtsy, my mother dabbing at pretend tears. They wouldn't realise I was gone until the after party, when someone might vaguely ask where the other daughter was. The night air hit my face like a slap. I walked faster, then broke into a run, my stupid dress shoes clacking against pavement. By the time I reached the train station, my breath came in sharp gasps, but my hands were steady. The ticket counter glowed like a beacon. "One way to Briar Hollow," I said, slapping down cash from the emergency fund I'd been skimming for months. The clerk raised an eyebrow at my shaking hands. "Rough night," I almost laughed. "You have no idea." The train whistled in the distance. I checked my phone one last time. 3 missed calls from an unknown number, probably the car service wondering where to pick me up. No messages from family. I powered it off and dropped it in the trash. As the train pulled away, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass, watching my reflection flicker in the dark. For the first time in 17 years, I wasn't someone's afterthought. I was just me. And that was enough. The train rattled through the night like a steel ghost, its rhythmic clattering the only sound in the nearly empty carriage. I curled my fingers around the worn photograph in my pocket. Mira's face staring back at me from a lifetime ago, her sun-weathered skin crinkled around eyes that never lied. Outside, black fields rushed past, occasionally broken by the orange glow of some lonely farmhouse window. A conductor passed through, his footsteps heavy with fatigue. He paused at my seat, taking in my formal dress and hollow expression. "End of the lines, Briar Hollow, miss. You sure that's where you're headed?" The question hung between us. Was I sure? The girl who'd spent her life begging for scraps of affection from people who'd stolen her. The daughter who'd let lawyers and paperwork erase her real history. I met his gaze. "I've never been more certain of anything." He nodded like he'd seen this before. Runaways and broken hearts all looked the same in the dim compartment lights. "Well, you've got about 3 hours to change your mind." As he moved on, I pressed my cheek against the cold window. Memories surfaced like bubbles in thick syrup. Mira teaching me to knead dough until my arms ached, showing me how to test watermelon ripeness by the hollow thump, her calloused hands guiding mine around the neck of a squealing goat we were trying to milk. Real memories, not the polished lies my so-called parents had fed society. Dawn crept in sideways, painting the rolling hills in watery gold. The landscape grew familiar, that crooked oak where we'd tied tire swings, the rusted tractor abandoned in Old Man Perry's field. My chest tightened. 7 years. 7 years since they ripped me away with court orders and threats. The brakes screeched as we pulled into Briar Hollow's crumbling station. Stepping onto the platform, the air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke, a scent that punched through me like a physical blow. The town hadn't changed. Same peeling paint on the general store, same missing L on the welcome sign. I walked the dirt road leading out of town, my dress shoes collecting dust. The closer I got, the slower my steps became. What if she'd moved? What if she hated me? What if... The farmhouse appeared around the bend, its porch sagging but stubborn. And there, in the pre-dawn gloom, stood Mira on the top step, shotgun propped against her hip like she'd been waiting all night. We stared at each other across 20 yards of gravel and 7 years of silence. Finally, she spat into the dirt. "Took you long enough." Something inside me cracked open. Not the dramatic, messy break I'd expected. Just a quiet giving way, like frozen ground thawing in spring. I took the first step home. Mira didn't hug me, didn't cry, just turned on her heel and marched toward the barn, leaving me standing in the yard like a stray dog. I followed, my stupid dress shoes sinking into the mud with every step. The barn smelled of hay and animal musk, Real smells. Nothing like the sterile lavender my mother sprayed everywhere to cover up the emptiness. Mira tossed a pair of work gloves at my chest. They hit me with a soft thud before I caught them. "Greenhouse needs weeding," she said, jerking her chin toward the leaning glass structure at the edge of the property. "Don't come back till it's done." I opened my mouth. To say what, I didn't know. An apology, an explanation. Mira cut me off with a look that could curdle milk. Work first, talking later. The greenhouse was a jungle of neglect. Tomato vines strangled pepper plants, and weeds poked through every crack in the stone floor. I knelt, the damp earth immediately soaking through my dress slacks, and started yanking. By noon, my back screamed in protest. My manicured nails, Camilla had insisted we get matching French tips, were packed with dirt, one cracked clean through. Sweat trickled down my spine, mixing with the dust coating my skin. Mira appeared at the door, silhouetted against the afternoon sun. She surveyed my progress with a grunt. "City hands." She disappeared again, returning minutes later with a chipped mug of water and a ham sandwich so thick it barely fit in my grip. I devoured it in 4 bites, not realizing how hungry I'd been until the first tang of mustard hit my tongue. "Finish by sundown," Mira said, already walking away. "Chickens won't feed themselves." I worked until my fingers cramped around the weeds, until the greenhouse floor showed between the plants, until the setting sun painted the glass walls orange. When I finally staggered back to the house, Mira was on the porch shelling peas. She didn't compliment my work, didn't ask how I was, just nodded toward the barn. "Water buckets next." I opened my mouth to protest. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache, but something in her expression stopped me. This wasn't punishment. This was trust. So I picked up the buckets and got back to work. That night, as I collapsed onto the narrow cot in the spare room, I found a tin of salve on the pillow. The label read, "For sore muscles," in Mira's jagged handwriting. No note, no explanation, just like always. 3 days passed without my phone ringing. Not once. The silence should have hurt, but instead it settled over me like a thick quilt, smothering the last embers of hope I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Mira found me staring at the dead screen during breakfast, her calloused hands slamming a basket of fresh eggs onto the table, hard enough to make me jump. "Expecting an apology?" she asked, cracking one into the skillet with unnecessary force. The yolk burst, spreading golden across the cast iron. "No," I said, turning the phone over in my hands. "Just confirmation." She snorted, flipping the egg with a practiced jerk of her wrist. "Rich folks don't apologise. They just pretend nothing happened." The truth of it settled between my shoulder blades like a physical weight. I'd spent years twisting myself into knots trying to earn their love, only to realise now that the game had been rigged from the start. There was no winning move. I set the phone on the windowsill and reached for the coffee pot. "They never even called me their daughter in private," I said, pouring until the mug nearly overflowed. "Just the girl when they thought I couldn't hear." Mira stilled, the spatula hovering midair. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the bacon sizzling in the pan. Then she turned, fixing me with a look that stripped me bare. "Why'd you really come back, kid?" The question hung between us, sharp as the butcher knife lying beside the breadboard. I could have given her a dozen pretty answers, that I'd missed the farm, that I'd finally seen through their lies. But under Mira's gaze, pretense withered like unwatered crops. "Because you never made me beg," I whispered. Something flickered in her eyes. Not pity, never pity, but understanding. She turned back to the stove, scraping the eggs onto a chipped plate. "Eat up," she grunted. "Got a whole field needs planting today." As I shoveled food into my mouth, the morning sun warmed my back through the thin cotton of my borrowed work shirt. Outside, the rooster crowed, and from the barn came the impatient bleating of goats waiting to be milked. No one was coming to look for me. and for the first time, that knowledge tasted like freedom instead of abandonment. I drained my coffee and reached for my boots. The past could keep its silence. I had work to do. The market stall wobbled as I set up the jars, their golden contents catching the early morning light. Mira's blackberry jam, thick as molasses, bursting with fruit she'd picked at the perfect moment between tart and sweet, looked downright criminal next to the watery store-bought preserves on neighbouring tables. Yet here we were, selling them for barely enough to cover the cost of sugar. "Price is fair," Mira muttered when I suggested raising it. She folded her arms across her chest, watching a woman in designer yoga pants haggle over 50 cents. Country folks know real work when they taste it. I bit my tongue. The woman drove off in a Mercedes without buying anything. That afternoon, while Mira napped in the rocking chair, I stole into town with 2 jars and my battered laptop. The internet cafe smelled of burnt coffee and teenage angst, but the Wi-Fi was strong. I created an Instagram account, H Mira's Harvest, and snapped photos of the jam glowing like gemstones on a slice of fresh bread, the farm sunrise painting the fields in pinks and golds behind them. Artisanal, small batch, hand-foraged. I typed words my so-called parents used to justify charging $20 for a side of avocado toast. Then, I tagged every food blogger and gourmet grocer within 100 miles. 3 days later, a silver Audi pulled into our driveway. A woman with a sleek blonde bob and a pencil skirt that probably cost more than our truck stepped out, holding up her phone. "Is this real?" she demanded, showing me our grainy photo. "No filters? No bullshit?" Mira emerged from the barn, wiping her hands on her overalls. "What's the trouble?" The woman, Lena, editor of Epicure Weekly, extended a manicured hand. "I'd like to feature your products in our next issue. And," she added with a glance at me, "I'll pay triple what you're asking at market." Mira's eyebrows nearly disappeared into her hairline. That night, we sat at the kitchen table, counting crisp $100 bills. Mira kept touching them like they might vanish, her thumb brushing over Ben Franklin's face. "City people are fools," she muttered, but there was a new light in her eyes. I pressed my palms against the warm wood, feeling the ghost of countless meals shared at this table. "This is just the beginning," I promised. Somewhere out there, my fake family was still dining at Michelin-starred restaurants, still bragging about Camilla's mediocre accomplishments. They had no idea the daughter they'd discarded was about to turn Mira's humble kitchen into something they couldn't ignore. The first spark had been lit. Now it was time to watch the whole damn world burn. The magazine hit grocery store racks on a Tuesday. By Wednesday afternoon, our landline wouldn't stop ringing. I stood in the farmhouse kitchen, receiver wedged between my shoulder and ear, scribbling orders on the back of feed invoices while Mira scowled at the growing stack of papers. "Another 5 dozen jars for that boutique in Charleston," I announced, hanging up for what felt like the 100th time. Mira wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron. "We don't even got 5 dozen jars left." I grinned, tapping the latest issue of Epicure Weekly, where Mira's hands, rough and honest, cradling a basket of sun-ripened strawberries, filled the glossy 2-page spread. "Then we'll make more." The article called us "A Revelation in Artisan Preserves" and "The Antidote to Soulless Corporate Food." Lena had worked magic with her words, spinning our story into something irresistible, the prodigal daughter returning to her roots, the tough-as-nails farmer with a heart of gold. She'd even included the photo I'd slipped her of me at 7 years old, grinning gap-toothed beside Mira at the county fair. My hair braided with wildflowers. I hadn't mentioned the family who'd stolen me. Not yet. Across town, in a penthouse I used to call home, someone was flipping through these same pages. I could picture it. Camilla's manicured fingers stabbing at my face in the background of a farm shot, her wine glass pausing halfway to her lips. "Isn't that?" The thought warmed me more than the summer sun beating down on the orchard. We hired help. 2 local girls who showed up eager to learn, their eyes widening when I handed them each a crisp 50 as an advance. Mira taught them how to stir the bubbling jam without scorching it, while I designed labels featuring her signature like a badge of honour. Mira's harvest, in bold letters no one could overlook. When the first luxury hotel order came in, 200 jars for their gourmet gift baskets, I made sure to include our story card. Founded by Alara Laurent, returning to her childhood farm after years away. Let them chew on that! The phone rang again. Mira answered this time, her voice gruff as ever, but I caught the way her shoulders straightened when the caller mentioned the magazine. Yep, she said, catching my eye across the room. That's us. I turned back to the stove, stirring a vat of blackberries that smelled like victory. They'd see the name everywhere soon, on boutique shelves, in five-star restaurants, in the hands of people whose opinions they actually cared about. And when they finally connected the dots, I'd be too busy counting our profits to care. The Blacktown car crawled up our dirt driveway like an unwelcome shadow, kicking up dust that settled on the freshly painted Mira's Harvest sign. I stood at the kitchen window, fingers tightening around a jar of peach preserves as the familiar chrome grille came into view. Mira slammed her palm on the countertop. Christ, on a cracker! Took 'em long enough. The car doors opened in perfect unison. First him, greying at the temples, Armani suit carefully chosen to look casual yet expensive. Then her. Blonde highlights freshly touched up, designer sunglasses hiding eyes that had never quite learned to fake warmth. Camilla slouched out last, her stiletto heels sinking into the gravel with every petulant step. I didn't move to greet them, let them knock. 3 sharp raps echoed through the house. I wiped my hands deliberately slow on my flour-dusted apron before opening the door just wide enough to force them to stand close together on the porch. Alara! My father reached out as if to hug me, then aborted the motion when I didn't reciprocate. We saw the magazine feature and just had to invest, my mother cut in, flashing teeth whiter than our goat's milk. This little operation of yours shows real promise. Behind them, Camilla wrinkled her nose at the chicken coop. Does it always smell like this? Mira appeared at my shoulder, her shotgun casually propped against the doorframe. Only when city folk show up stinking of desperation. A muscle twitched in my father's jaw. Perhaps we could discuss this inside. Like, civilized. No. My voice came out colder than I'd intended. The word hung between us, sharp as broken glass. My mother tried a different tack, her manicured hand fluttering to her chest. Darling, we've missed you terribly. When you left without a word. I laughed then, a real ugly sound that startled a crow from the nearby oak. You mean when you didn't notice I was gone for 3 days? Camilla huffed, crossing her arms. Are you really still mad about some stupid birthday? The sun beat down on our little standoff, cicadas humming in the sudden silence. I studied their faces, the carefully constructed concern, the barely concealed calculation. They didn't want me. They wanted the brand, the story, the profit margins. I reached behind the door and produced a single jar of honey, the glass still warm from the kitchen. Here, I said, pressing it into my mother's reluctant hands. A souvenir. Her perfectly plucked eyebrows drew together. I don't understand. I know. I started closing the door. That's always been the problem. Mira's chuckle followed me inside as the lock clicked shut. Through the window, I watched them stand there, momentarily stunned. 3 peacocks stranded in a barnyard. The vultures had come circling and found the carcass already picked clean. The email arrived at 3:17 a.m., an official notice from the State Agricultural Board demanding an urgent inspection of our facilities. I read it twice by flashlight, my bare feet cold against the farmhouse floorboards, before waking Mira with a gentle shake. They're making their move, I whispered, handing her the printed sheet. She squinted at the document, lips moving silently over phrases like unsanitary conditions and consumer safety concerns. With a snort, she crumpled it into a ball. Bastards couldn't even wait for sunrise. By noon, 3 negative reviews popped up on gourmet food forums, all from newly created accounts, all describing mould in jars of our preserves. The local health inspector, a sweaty man with a too-tight collar, spent 4 hours poking through our spotless kitchen before leaving with a begrudging all clear. Camilla's Instagram post dropped at cocktail hour, a carefully angled selfie with our magazine feature visible in the background, captioned, "Some people will do anything for attention." Her followers ate it up, flooding our page with troll comments. I waited until midnight when the rage simmering in my chest had cooled to something razor-sharp and precise. Then, I uploaded the scanned documents to a food industry watchdog blog. The court orders, the adoption papers, the bank statements, showing payments to a shady private investigator dated 2 weeks before they found me. The blog owner called it the most explosive exposé since the champagne counterfeiting scandal. I called it truth. By morning, the Laurent family lawyers were scrambling. By afternoon, #stolen daughter was trending. And by evening, as Mira and I sat on the porch splitting a fresh baked peach pie, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Some fires, once lit, can't be put out with apologies. The auctioneer's gavel cracked like a gunshot, the sound echoing through the half-empty courthouse. Sold to bidder number 14 for $42,000. My fingers trembled as I signed the paperwork. The notary peered at me over her glasses. "You're aware this parcel borders protected wetlands. Can't build on it." "That's perfect," I said, sliding the documents back. "I plan to let it breathe." The keys to Grantham Meadows, 200 acres of prime bottomland the Lorents had swindled from Mira after taking me, felt heavier than they should have. The deed bore my real name now, the ink still damp from the county clerk's stamp. Elara Marie Whitaker, a name buried in sealed adoption records, a name whispered to me in dreams before I understood why it mattered. Mira waited outside in our mud-splattered truck, engine idling. She didn't ask if I'd won the bid, just reached over and squeezed my wrist when I climbed in, her calluses catching on my skin like old secrets. We drove straight to the property, tyres kicking up gravel on the long-abandoned access road. The fields lay fallow, choked with thistles where Mira once grew the sweetest corn in 3 counties. At the crest of the hill, the skeleton of her original farmhouse stood sentinel, its collapsed porch still showing scorch marks from the mysterious fire that had forced her to relocate. I knelt in the brittle grass, pressing my palms to earth that remembered my footprints from when I was small enough to hide between the corn rows. The wind carried ghosts, Mira singing off-key as she picked beans, the creak of the porch swing where she'd rock me during thunderstorms, the sharp tang of blackberries we'd steal from the brambles behind the barn. "Could rebuild," Mira said, nudging a charred beam with her boot. "Could," I agreed, watching a red-tailed hawk circle overhead. We both knew we wouldn't. Some wounds needed to heal wild. Back at the truck, I pulled out the manila envelope I'd been carrying for weeks. The private investigator's report had cost me 6 months' profits, but the page marked with a yellow sticky note made it worthwhile, an address in Oregon, a woman with my chin and Mira's stubborn brow. Mira studied the photo clipped to the file, her thumb brushing the face of a stranger who shared our blood. "You gonna contact her?" The late afternoon sun gilded the overgrown fields, turning the thistles into something almost beautiful. Not yet. I tucked the envelope away, its weight settling against my ribs. Some reclamations needed time. The hawk screamed again as we drove away, its cry slicing through the golden silence. Behind us, the land exhaled. They came at dusk, their Mercedes crunching over our gravel drive for what I knew would be the final time. The father's tailored suit had lost its crispness. The mother's perfect hair showed dark roots, and Camilla, for once, had nothing to say, her designer sunglasses doing little to hide puffy eyes. I met them on the porch, barefoot and flour-dusted from helping Mira knead dough. No pretense, no invitations inside, just silence stretching between us like the long shadows creeping across the yard. The mother spoke first, voice cracking. "We didn't know." "Stop!" The word landed between us like an axe. I studied their faces, searching for some glimmer of genuine remorse beneath the panic of ruined reputations. Found none. "You knew exactly what you were buying that year." Camilla made a choked noise. "You're destroying our lives over ancient history." A barn owl called from the rafters as I considered how to explain that stolen childhoods don't expire like milk. Instead, I reached behind the screen door and produced a mason jar filled with peach pits collected all summer. Hard, ugly things that still carried the ghost of sweetness. "Take this," I said, pressing it into the father's limp hands. "Plant them. Maybe something honest will grow." The mother actually flinched. For a heartbeat, I thought she might finally say something real. Then her lawyer's instincts kicked in, shoulders squaring for negotiations. I didn't wait to hear it. The screen door slapped shut behind me, its familiar squeak cutting off whatever plea or threat came next. Through the mesh, I watched them stand there, 3 strangers in my driveway holding the worthless remains of what they'd tried to own. Mira didn't look up from rolling pie crust. "They gone?" I leaned against the counter, breathing in cinnamon and certainty. "Yeah." Outside, tires spun gravel as headlights swept away down the darkening road. The latch clicked softly behind them. This time it stayed closed. The first frost came early that year, painting the fields in crystalline lace. I stood at the kitchen window, watching dawn bleed across the horizon, steam from my coffee curling against the cold glass. Behind me, Mira banged pots around the stove, muttering about the damn thermostat as she always did when winter crept in. The letter arrived mid-morning, carried up the drive by a postman who now knew us by name. Thick ivory paper, embossed letterhead, another gourmet chain begging for exclusivity rights. I tossed it onto the growing pile by the fruit bowl, without breaking rhythm as I labelled jars of spiced pear butter. Mira snorted, stirring a bubbling cauldron of apple cider. "City folks act like we invented fruit." We worked in comfortable silence, the farm humming around us, goats bleating in the pasture, the new hired girl singing off-key in the packing shed, the distant rumble of the delivery truck heading out with its cargo of jams and honey. Every jar bore Mira's signature now, her looping script as much a part of the brand as the taste. At lunch, I found her studying a faded Polaroid tacked to the fridge, me at 8 years old, grinning with blackberry-stained teeth, both of us squinting into sunlight long since lost to memory. "Never did teach you to smile pretty for pictures," she grumbled, but her finger traced the cracked edge of the photo with unexpected tenderness. I reached past her for the pickle jar, my shoulder brushing hers. "Lucky me!" The afternoon sun slanted through the greenhouse as I transplanted seedlings. Next summer's strawberries, their roots still fragile. Through the glass, I spotted the UPS truck winding up our driveway again. Probably more fan mail from the food blogs or another interview request. But the package was small, wrapped in brown paper with a Portland postmark. No return address, just my full name written in careful block letters. Inside lay a sprig of dried lavender and a snapshot of a woman kneeling in a garden, her sun hat shadowing features that mirrored mine in ways that made my throat tighten. On the back, in the same precise handwriting, "When you're ready." The greenhouse door creaked open as Mira entered, her boots tracking in fresh earth. She took one look at the photo in my shaking hands and wordlessly pressed a warm cider into my palm. We stood there among the seedlings as the winter light faded, the quiet full of things that didn't need saying. Outside, the first snowflakes began to spiral down. Not an ending, but a breath held between chapters. I tucked the photo into my overalls pocket, right over my heartbeat. There would be time for new stories tomorrow. Tonight, the cider was sweet, the stove crackled with applewood, and the woman who chose me every day was humming off-key as she kneaded dough. Somewhere beyond our warm circle of light, the world kept turning, Let it. I had everything I needed right here,